Hello, everyone, and welcome to Decoding Reality, a decoding TV podcast about reality television. I'm David Chen. I'm here with Joy Napping. Joy, thanks for chatting with me today.
I'm so glad to be so physically proximate to you.
We are broadcasting this live at youtube.com/decodingtv. We had some technical snafus tonight, which, as I've made clear to everyone, is in fact a piece of meta performance art about the problems that Netflix experienced tonight. But on this episode of Decoding Reality, what we're going to be doing is discussing the Love is Blind season 4 reunion, the live reunion. You can find more episodes of this podcast at decodingreality.tv, and be sure to check out the flagship Decoding TV podcast at podcast.decodingtv.com. So let's get into it. But before we talk about the content of this episode, we need to acknowledge some of the problems that happened with the live broadcast that Netflix is attempting. Now, just some context. Netflix has not done very many live broadcasts. They've only done Chris Rock live broadcast, and then this is going to be their second event. And they want to move more into it. There's a bunch of potential things you can do when you're broadcasting live, like sports and the SAG Awards and the Oscars or whatever they want to do. And so every entry that Netflix makes into live broadcast is a significant one because it's like, hey, we're showing that we can do live broadcast competently, deliver content to millions of homes simultaneously with no issue. Netflix spent a lot of marketing dollars trying to get people to tune into their live broadcast for Love is Blind today at 5 p.m. Pacific on April 16th. And when 5 p.m. rolled around, the experience that a lot of people had was nothing. There is a waiting room that you're supposed to be able to go into that's like, hey, the live stream will start soon, and then it's supposed to magically start after that. Many people, ourselves included, couldn't even get into the waiting room. We're unsuccessful in getting into the waiting room. And then when we were able to get into the waiting room, it was like, hey, the live stream is having problems. You know, hopefully it'll start soon.
Sometimes, like, our best experience of this hour plus was that there'd be this kind of like vaguely ambient hold music, and then sometimes the hold music would get interrupted, and I'd look up from whatever I was multitasking on, and think, oh, the stream is finally starting, and in fact, it would usually mean that the app was crashing. And that we were on the verge of getting like the sort of wheel of death, or maybe like just an outright error message with a code. And I thought what was really bewildering is that Netflix official comms said very little about this. In the first few minutes after 5 o'clock Pacific, they said it's going to be delayed 15 minutes. 15 minutes comes and goes, 30 minutes comes and like no further communication from them. And at one point, Vanessa Lachey starts just going live on Instagram personally, showing the audience and saying, like, we're here, we haven't done it yet. Like, because I think, like many people, I wondered, is this show happening and I just can't get in because it's just crashed due to demand from so many viewers? Or is it not happening at all and they're going to just cancel it for the night? It was pretty bewildering. And, Succession was coming up, and I wanted to know when I would be able to flip over to that.
I think many people would like be understanding if it was delayed by like 5, 10, 15 minutes. Like that's all, even 30 minutes, I think people would still be understanding. But after it was like rounding the 40-minute mark, that's when it really felt like something was terribly wrong. And it was very obvious because you couldn't even get into the waiting room to be in the live stream. So it was like, it didn't feel like a problem. Like I'm sure there's going to be reporting that comes out about what went wrong. We're recording this like immediately after we were able to finish watching it. But it felt like when I was watching it, I was like, this does not feel like a problem that's going to just go away in the next 10 minutes.
Oh, I thought they would cancel it outright. Basically just film it and then end up airing it. So what's amazing is an hour 15, an hour 20, whatever in, we start getting one text from a friend that's like, hey, I'm in. So we were nervous. We could not get in. I think as of this moment, we've now watched the entire thing and gone back and watched the beginning. I think there are still people who haven't been able to see it. And so who knows what, like even with us, we watched it on the Netflix app of the Apple TV and it wouldn't let us in. So then we went to the Netflix native app of the smart TV and we were able to get in that way. So, there are going to be a lot of brutal postmortems on this. And I just want to say, the strategy that Netflix always had was this sort of binge model, and it was meant to feel so different and so bold, and we all believed that they had data that we didn't. We, the rest of the poor schmucks who grew up on network television, like, just didn't understand. And so the idea that they're trying to do these things that are the bread and butter of network television and failing so badly, they can't even pull off one single show on a given night, is just, I think there's a lot of people over at, say, Paramount or
Well, yeah, there was a lot of shade being thrown from
NBC,
like Peacock and
chuckling
Hulu.
tonight.
They were all like
Yeah.
tweeting through it in a really funny way. We should say that they did send out a tweet. I think I have that here. Hopefully this goes okay. Yes. So they said, to everyone who stayed up late, woke up early, gave up their Sunday afternoon, we are incredibly sorry that the Love is Blind reunion did not turn out as we had planned. We're filming it now, and we'll have it on Netflix as soon as humanly possible. Again, thank you and sorry. So that was at 6:29 p.m., I believe. So 90 minutes after the special was supposed to begin airing. The thing that was very bizarre about even this message is at the time that this message was sent, some people were able to watch it live. So it was, or they were watching it at that moment. So it was very confusing. Some people were able to watch it live. Some people were watching a video on demand. It was basically just overall a complete catastrophe.
And when we tried to go in, like, it would allow us to join live, but if we tried to back up, like, that was just the kiss of death, and it just sat at 25% loading for minutes and would error out.
Yeah.
So, obviously, I know that Netflix has the rights to broadcast one of the awards shows. I think it might be the SAG Awards.
Yeah, I think it's SAG, yeah.
And this past year, they didn't do it. They actually chose instead to broadcast it on their YouTube channel, like the YouTube channel called Netflix, which is a little embarrassing to not even have the technology, since you're theoretically a tech company, to actually serve this event live. I think they didn't want to take that risk. Their platform is supposed to be ready for it next year. We shall see, because I think, Love is Blind reunion might have more audience than the SAG Awards. I don't know, but certainly wouldn't have as important people who would want to really make sure they show up well.
Yeah. Carol says, People magazine started releasing prepackaged articles with spoilers before it started airing live for the limited group that was able to view it.
Oh,
Awesome.
interesting.
Yeah,
Great.
often what will happen for an event like this is press will be pre-briefed. With like stuff that's going to come out during the thing, and then it's like, do not publish this until this time, but then people must have wrote the articles and then started deploying them. Whole thing was a mess, and I think online people's latent Netflix resentments really boiled to the surface. Like, you're charging us money, Netflix, for, like, you're raising prices, Netflix, you're canceling beloved shows, and also, by the way, airing the Love is Blind reunion live when past reunions have not been live. You chose this. You didn't need to choose it, but now that you have, you can't even do a good job and deliver on the stream itself. So yes, people are saying, Grace is saying, I actually forgive the tech problems. And I should point out, by the way, listeners at Decoding Reality, we are broadcasting live right now at youtube.com/decodingtv. So if you are listening to this in podcast form, you might hear us referring to people's comments on the broadcast. But Grace J says, I can actually forgive them for the tech problems. While we don't know the issues, what the issues were, the communication was/is not great. I agree with you. That was the biggest problem. Was there was no, hey, we're still working on it. Here's what the nature of the problem is. There was nothing. Also,
you've worked in comms, and I've worked in the news media, and when there is this long without communication, it actually makes you worried that no one's in charge.
Yeah.
Not that the communication is a problem, but that no one has actually made a call. Are we pushing it by an hour? Are we pushing, like, what's the story? Like, maybe no decision has been made.
It feels like it was chaos over there.
Yeah.
And See Me Loves in the chat says, I still can't watch it. It loads for like a second at a time and then just keeps saying part of the interruption. I don't know what to do anymore.
Oh.
So Opinionated in the chat says, you guys should be working for Netflix. You're live with no delay. Not quite true. We did have some tech issues here.
This is our third try at this. In fact, it was pretty humiliating that we were trying to roast them and having our own tech issues. So that's why we're physically in the same room.
Yeah, we're physically in the same room, which is why it might sound a little bit different than usual. Okay. So the Love is Blind live reunion experience, overall a disaster. people couldn't get in. People were getting in at different times, and then the reunion itself, there were also technical problems. There was like sound issues during the reunion. Somebody's mic went on, and then you could hear it in the stream, and they had to like call that out.
And interrupt Marshall at a point where he was trying to make like an important point, because somebody's mic in the control room was audible. But if I could just like sketch for people what did and didn't happen, because a lot of folks haven't even seen it. It's Nick and Vanessa Lachey in the middle. And then Kwame and Chelsea were there, Zach and Bliss, and Tiffany and Brett. All couples still seem to be going strong. And we learn that they actually hang out with each other, which is very sweet. And then in addition, we had Paul on one side of the stage, and on the other side of the stage were Marshall and Micah, and then an empty chair for Irina, who shows up later. So we'll get into all of that. Not shown were Jackie and Josh. And it was very strange because Jackie had been really raring to, basically confront Josh at the reunion. And I was
Confront
nervous.
Marshall.
Or confront Marshall. I was a little nervous there might be like a physical altercation if she like threw the ring in his face or something. They did appear in a separate pre-taped segment by Zoom where they talked to Vanessa Lachey yesterday, and then that was like cut in, and then Marshall was allowed to respond to it. So the dynamics were a little strange, but overall it was there were some little prepackaged bits, but mostly it was just interviewing the couples as well as getting into what Nick Lachey called the love triangles. I sometimes feel like they really play up that angle in a way that's feels pretty like forced, and that did happen this time. But
well, I want to begin by saying I know that this podcast has tens of listeners,
but only probably twos of them actually watched the live show.
Yeah, we're capable of it. But in the extremely unlikely event that Vanessa Lachey is one of those, let's say, 18 listeners, Vanessa, your moderating skills are bad, and you should feel bad. You did a bad job at the Love is Blind.
You had a lot of really leading questions, and you always ask uncomfortably personal questions about people's sex lives that no one cares about.
Absolutely. This is it was embarrassing, and the sheer quantity of raking over the coals that's going to occur to Vanessa Lachey is on TikTok and everywhere is going to be massive, and the overwhelmingly vast majority of it will be deserved because she did a bad job, and it was almost shameful how bad it was. So I just need to start by saying that, and I just want to say Nick Lachey actually, in my opinion, pretty solid moderator. Like, he had good questions, good follow-ups. Then Vanessa's just asking when people are going to have babies. She just wants a blood sacrifice, I think, is what I can tell. It was very deeply uncomfortable, and also she asked a bunch of questions that people didn't care about. So anyway, that's my overall take on the reunion special.
She also wore what you said looked like a glitter baby burp cloth on one side of her asymmetrical dress. Most people wore evening dress, the women, while the men wore suits, and in Paul's case, a shirt with little broken hearts all over it, which was interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting choice.
Okay, now that I have that out of the way, Joy, what did you think of the live reunion special?
Well, why don't we take it one couple at a time?
Yeah.
They started basically with Kwame and Chelsea, who are complicated to get into because they also did talk about Chelsea's reaction to seeing the footage with Micah. Kwame and Chelsea are still together. They're living in Seattle. He did make the move. He has said offline that he regrets the digs he made at Seattle and wishes he could take that back. And the place he lives now is the most favorite place he's ever lived. Having seen footage of their apartment, it would also be my favorite place. Like, I would like to move there right now. It's this incredible apartment up in the sky. A friend of mine, who I mentioned previously, Anju, lived in Insignia, the building near it, and it's not that building, but we were all trying to ID what is this incredible building, and I think we figured it out.
Yeah.
I think it's called
Arrive, I believe.
Arrive, yeah, apartments. And as documented elsewhere, Chelsea has now met Kwame's mom. They seem to have a warm relationship. She, is fully enfolded in the family. But, I think the stuff with Micah, Chelsea's gotten into in a few different interviews and talked again about, it was very uncomfortable to watch. Micah basically apologized, and Kwame apologized, I thought, more wholeheartedly. He apologized to Chelsea, he apologized to Chelsea's family, and he apologized to the viewing public, which was like, oh, okay, that's a pretty broad, set of folks you're covering there. But I think that, the takeaway seemed to be that they felt that the strength of the relationship was really not shown in the edit. And that's partly why it makes it seem like Chelsea's not doing any compromising, Kwame's doing all the compromising. Things like that made people, wonder if this relationship was going to work.
Right.
That the strength of the connection they had in the pods, versus the strength of the connection he had with Micah kind of was edited to look more even when it probably wasn't. He was on his way, he says, to break up with Micah, and he had written down even like a breakup little speech. That he had had a couple long dates with Micah in the pods and had actually cut those short, I think, or she had cut them short. Like, it was clear that it was waning. And then he does kind of own up, because my perception was always that he didn't like being rejected by Micah, even if it was kind of starting to wind down. He says, that it is still hard to process. Like, even when something's going to end, or it's like the right decision to end it, you can still sit on your bed and eat ice cream for a month. And I thought, that's a fair point, that you do go through some pain in that time. And I thought Chelsea was so gracious about it. She basically said, I give people like the maximum benefit of the doubt and assume positive intent. And we're all going through this complex thing. And, I don't know. I just thought she came across as very grown up about it. What'd you think?
Yeah. The people in the chat are saying, like Hiron's saying, I still feel Kwame's faking it a bit. I don't know why. I feel like if you're willing to get married and stay together for 2 years, you could become a huge influencer. Opinionated in the chat and saying Kwame is clearly not into Chelsea. He's riding this reality star wave right now. I think one of the things that I really appreciated about the reunion, and what the people had to say about the reunion, the couples, is more than previous seasons. I think they have pointed to the limitations of the show itself during the reunion. They have made comments like, well, the producers asked me to do this, or they've said the edit didn't reflect this. And I think that it is actually important for people watching this to understand, when you watch the edit on Love is Blind, you are not seeing the totality of a relationship. You are seeing a carefully constructed story, often misleadingly constructed story, for the purposes of creating drama and selling the show.
And very simplified, for sure.
Exactly. And that's what Kwame is saying, now, whether or not he's being genuine, I don't like to play the game in general. I don't like to play the game of like, oh, he's clearly faking. He's a faker. I try not to play that game because you don't know what is in someone's heart. If I take Kwame at his word, I actually think that he made a good point. You only saw, he said 1% or 10% of the Kwame-Chelsea relationship, and maybe that's true. We'll see. I don't know, but I'm not willing to pass judgment on it. I agree with you. Chelsea was very gracious. So yeah.
Now, I want to bring up the first Vanessa Lachey fail of many for me. Is she asked him about that comment about being called Alex, and Kwame basically, I think he expanded on a point I already understood, which is he was trying to not bring race or country of origin or things that might, to me, that I can't pull those apart from my identity. But, he wanted to maybe present in a way where that wasn't the first thing that was talked about. Because I think in the first few dates, you only have 7 or 10 minutes with people. And so because the name Kwame just sounds West African, he was talking with the producer, how would I go about, maybe even not talking like that's my name. And he ended up saying something along the lines of, oh, well, I could go by Alex, but I decided to go with Kwame. And apparently it was cut out of the edit that he then says, and I'm really proud of my name. So I think he has gotten a ton of blowback from Black people, the Black community especially, about kind of really sounding like he's ashamed of being black, or that he, has issues with wanting to minimize that part of his identity. He is saying, again, you can take him at his word or not, that that's not how he feels. He wore a necklace that was actually really stealth, incredibly expensive. It was like diamonds on a chain, and then had a Africa, the continent shape. So he really wanted to sort of say, like, hey, I was a little misrepresented there. Then, like, Vanessa Lachey proceeds to call him Alex Kwame more times. I don't really understand, like, what she was trying to say there. But okay, fine. Chelsea gets into it a little bit about how much she loves Calvin Klein, which, reinforces for me that, like, Chelsea and I probably would not be besties. I can, like and admire and respect Chelsea. Hopefully I like and admire and respect people generally, as much as possible. I think, I don't get her taste. I don't get her vibe, but I don't need to. So, if I ever run into her at the Trader Joe's, I probably would say hi.
Grace is saying his name is Alex Kwame. So
his name is actually Alex Kwame.
Yeah.
Oh, out of all of those names that he has. I see.
Carol in the chat says, what about the Kwame near proposal to Micah? Did they address? They did address it, I think, and there was a scene where they played where Chelsea and Micah actually, like, it was unaired. It was a deleted scene, but they actually talked about the poolside scene and they worked things out, and it felt very mature to me. So.
I felt like Micah basically apologized for the part where she said the failed proposal joke, but she did not apologize for actively flirting with him for then 20 to 30 minutes, which I think was inappropriate for both sides. But, I think that Kwame said, I let my ego get the best of me, and it was immature, and it was, like, basically selfish. And I think that's closer to, like, what I think is, like, accountability for the situation.
Totally. Okay, so that's kind of the Kwame, Chelsea, Micah situation.
Yes. Then they move to Zach and Bliss, who are also still together. And, Bliss's dad has come around. They claim Bliss's dad is, like, really close to Zach, and they, like, talk all the time, which I thought was actually nice to hear, that he is at least open to having his mind changed. The part between Zach and Bliss, I would say that discussion, there wasn't that many fireworks. We did hear a new song that Zach sang to Bliss, and I probably blacked out at that point because it was, like, honestly pretty painful. Like,
they need to stop having songs on the show.
This is in the sort of tour of their life as a married couple. He, like, sings this song to her in the room with the owl painting and the katana. It seems like probably they've moved into that apartment that we saw. Then, surprise, there's been sort of an empty chair on stage at this point. Micah's just, like, suddenly on stage, or Irina. And they didn't say, like, oh, and now we're going to bring out Irina. It was she was just suddenly there.
She's just suddenly there. Yeah.
It's another great production choice by Netflix.
They did introduce her, so but they didn't, like, it's just like, we are now joined by Irina was how it went, basically.
So she had a chance to talk too, and that was interesting.
Yeah, they had an audience, a live studio audience for the reunion this time, which they haven't had in previous seasons, and people were really booing Irina and, like, reacting badly to Irina. Like, Irina started crying and everyone started laughing. People in the audience were, like, visibly laughing and, like, kind of doing, like, an ooh sound.
It wasn't like a Spanish bullfighting level of audience participation, but it didn't feel like people were really that open to having their mind changed by anything she had to say.
Yeah, and that's what ended up happening is she kind of presented her case, and
I felt like Irina basically, they played a lot of footage of her being mean.
And the footage is brutal. Like, they compress all of her meanness into, like, a 1 to 2 minute
50%
segment.
50% of the worst stuff she did. Like, they don't even have the birthday cake thing in there. And there's unaired stuff that Bliss has said went down between them. But basically, Irina, takes a breath and she's like, it's very hard to see this, but I was going through a lot with mental illness and having panic attacks. And I knew, pretty early on. So she tries to, like, put her best foot forward, which is, Zach, you were the best guy I met on the show. recall earlier in the edit, she had said he was one of the best guys she met on this show out of only 15 guys. Um, and, she says she knew pretty much even before going to Mexico that it wasn't going to work between them. But then the producers said, why don't you give it a chance and see where it goes?
Yeah, that was a little awkward because Vanessa asked the question, well, if you knew it wasn't going to work out, why did you even try going to Mexico? And Irina's like, well, because the producers asked me to. So it's like, dude, it feels like the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing when it comes to some of these questions from Vanessa.
And, I think that Irina, attempts to basically say, I'm sorry, and that's not me. I don't believe that people are fixed quantities. I think you can grow. But if someone has like 100 chances and 100 number of those times out of 100, they have the same behavior, that's kind of who they are right now, So it was very odd, to hear her say that as a bit of a deflection. But she's like, that's not me. And I know I was really awful. And I'm just going to try to grow from it. And no one wanted to let her off the hook. So apparently, in addition, she also DM'd Bliss or messaged Bliss while she was in Mexico with Zach and said, you dodged a bullet. At the same time that she's telling Zach, you should really go chase after Bliss. And
around the same time, I don't think it was the same,
not
texting
the same minute,
session.
but in the same few days. And so Zach basically is like, hey, I'm just going to say it. I think that you came on this show to be famous.
Yeah.
And, I don't think you were ever serious. And she, defends herself some from that. But I think most people think that she maybe went on the show, if not to be famous, then certainly not with the openest of hearts.
One thing I really appreciated about what Zach said was any sin that has been committed on this show, the people have already been punished enough. And I actually agree with that. Because the punishment is millions of people know about how terrible you are. Millions of people know about your mistakes. And I actually thought that was a very astute observation. Hey, whatever hatred you have for Irina, she's already getting tens of thousands of freaking hate messages already. That's already enough punishment. You don't need to extract any further punishment from this person. And I did appreciate, I thought that most people on the stage were pretty compassionate to each other in general.
I agree. It did not feel like last season's reunion when it felt so ugly and it felt like the girls had all sort of gotten together and were a little bit aligned against most of the men. It actually felt, or the girls plus Brennan, basically.
It felt like these are people that wanted to move on into the next stage of their lives.
And it's been a year and you really felt the passage of that year. And so Zach and Bliss said, hey, we both have forgiven Irina. Bliss did say, you can have mental illness issues and those are very real and panic attacks are very real. And, this was really malicious. Vanessa Lachey looked like she was about to start crying. I don't know if you noticed this when she said to Irina, you have talked about being bullied when you were younger in your life. So didn't you feel like these things you were doing were really malicious and didn't that bring back any memories? And Vanessa Lachey, again, gets real overwhelmingly into it when she's into it. And
the moderator should not be emotionally involved in the what's going on, in my opinion. That's my opinion. Other people might feel differently, but I don't think she should be that emotionally invested. It's inappropriate, but also it makes for a worse program. You want somebody who is bringing difficult questions, who you can't tell whose side they're on, because we could tell whose side she's on. She's on Jackie and Josh's side, inexplicably.
It was really weird. And she's anti-Paul, and she wanted to nail Irina. Okay, fine. Before we leave this couple, we did get more time spent with the song I Hope You Dance and talking about the lyrics, and it's fine. Zach has posted a very personal Instagram notes, which I won't read. It's many pages long about sort of how a really dark time in his life, and I think I continue to feel like Zach doesn't need to be for me. He's for Bliss. I really feel like they're for each other, and that's great. Fine. Great.
Yeah.
So then we move to Paul and Micah. And in some ways, the show pivoted to that by talking about Irina and Micah as mean girls. We even had a little bit of a discussion of Shelby, and Micah had
Not enough. Like they said like, hey, we're gonna get to Shelby, and then they never bring it up again. So yet another one of Vanessa Lachey's crimes. That can be blamed on both Vanessa and Nick, but like, the stuff that the reunion focused on, like a lot of it was meaningless BS, and then to not talk about the Shelby thing in depth, which is arguably one of the biggest moments of the series.
Well,
I think is a real disservice to the viewers, I would say.
I agree. I think particularly not asking, like, how did it make you feel to hear that your best friend said, I hoped that was how it would go down, right?
Ask the question.
Instead, what she asked was, like, how did it make you feel that, like, your friends weren't supportive of the relationship with Paul? And Micah basically is like, well, Shelby just cares about me so much that she wants to control me and, like, not have me be happy unless she says it's okay. She didn't say that. But I think, since then, Micah's posted, I think, to Instagram, or was it like a magazine shoot, stuff about her and Shelby and being best friends. And that relationship feels like as strong as ever, which is really interesting. Because it feels maybe not the warmest.
Or not even the warmest, but just not a relationship that's super beneficial for her,
Yeah, no, it actually felt actively cruel. So the crux of the conversation between Micah and Paul, first Micah's asked would she really have said yes, and she says she would have. And then there's this fairly long back and forth because Micah just saw 2 days ago the same footage that we all saw, in which Paul said, like, I couldn't picture her being the mother of my children.
Yeah, and Vanessa was like very offended by this,
and she
just went after
on
Paul, like just
and
vicious.
So he has like lots of chances to like say his position, and to me his position honestly sounds pretty reasonable, and Vanessa just won't take it. She's like, are you, Micah, as confused as I am? Because I'm not following this at all. And I'm like, oh, is the point for you to follow it? Because I followed it, like maybe we could have Nick speak a little on occasion.
Once again, Vanessa Lachey's moderation was bad, and she should feel bad. I've said it already, I need to reiterate it. It was really horrible. It was, as somebody, I am a moderator of conversations myself, and as somebody who moderates things, I was embarrassed on her behalf. Okay. But yes, the dynamic you described is accurate.
I just, Micah felt blindsided because she had never heard that. So, we had the reaction in our kind of episode 12 podcast episode that we were like, what did we miss in the edit? Like, clearly there's a whole bunch of stuff that went down that we never saw. Well, according to Micah, it never went down, and she was also really confused, particularly by that comment. She felt like she had never heard that before. So, Paul, over the course of the discussion in the reunion, he does apologize basically for blindsiding her. And he says he could have communicated that more. But he basically said he never saw this like nurturing side of her. And he tries to clarify that he wasn't even trying to say she was incapable of it as a human, but that he never saw it between them. And he's like, maybe I didn't bring out the more nurturing side of her. Maybe I didn't inspire that in her by making her feel, cared for. I mean, whatever. She's like 4 years out from being a sorority girl, and she still hangs out with sorority girl, mean girl vibe people. Like, it's not a nurturing,
milieu.
It's really not, so I'm not surprised that he couldn't see it. And I think, his read was kind of accurate that maybe she's not there right this minute. And, they only have a chance to date for 20 or 30 days. So I just feel like, that Vanessa was so hard on him, as if it was impossible to believe that any woman who wants to be a mother would automatically give off nurturing vibes. It was just like, I don't know. It felt like she felt like he had insulted all women or something, the way that she went after him.
Yeah, I agree. It was not what I think Paul was going for. The thing that I felt quite disappointed by was, as you said, the very final episode of the show. It's like, oh, they didn't feel like they were safe with each other. They didn't feel like they trusted each other. And it felt like they came out of nowhere. Based on everything we'd seen, and I was hoping we would get an exploration or an explanation more of what was going on there. and I don't think we really did. We did get some statements where Paul said, or the one thing I will credit Vanessa Lachey for is when
Yes, I was about to say this too.
Zach whispers to Paul, and then Vanessa Lachey's like, "What are you whispering?" And that's a
So
good.
like the camera caught it. It was
Yeah.
while someone else was talking, and we didn't think we'd ever get.
Yeah, so that was a good thing that she caught, and that was like, and then he explains like, I don't think Micah ever saw herself being married to Paul, and he's like, I have heard women in this stage talk to me about how they didn't think Micah didn't want to be married, and and I think that I actually don't know what the truth is, because Irina explains, hey, we're on this weird dating show. Like, we can't really imagine being married to any of these people. Like, it felt like Irina's story felt very plausible to me, basically. I don't know.
So basically,
Yeah.
Vanessa says, hey, I see whispering over there. Do you want to say what that was? And Zach was like, okay, fine. And, Zach and Paul are like buds. They think very similarly, and,
Yeah.
They've clearly become really close. And he's like, I hear Paul defending Micah constantly. I hear Paul being really gracious to Micah, and I do not hear Micah trying to defend Paul's position in this experiment. And I have heard, and from women in the group, which, Vanessa Lachey then tries to do some like detective work as to who it is, which
Yeah.
is very uncomfortable.
Yes, extremely.
That Micah basically was never serious about getting married on the show, and he never says like he is trying to play the victim card, but like that's the vibe, right? That's the implication. On Natalie and Deep D's podcast, Natalie has said she has also heard that from people close to the show. And, I saw a TikTok of people that live in Scottsdale who know Micah. I think that rumor is out there. I don't know that I think she's a huge mastermind or anything, but I do think, she might be playing the angles. That's fine. Her response to that is she's really offended, like, who, me? Do you like my Southern accent that I...
Oh, wow.
What did you think?
I literally didn't know what you were impersonating just now.
It's a Southern belle.
It almost sounded Australian to me.
I am
Who, me, mate?
notoriously terrible at accents, like really bad. Okay, well, somewhere in the Southern Hemisphere or the southern part of the United States, there's a innocent, victim saying "who me," and I think that Micah seems pretty unhappy. Like, I think she thought she was looking for answers and closure in this discussion, and she doesn't necessarily get it.
Jonah Alexander says, I thought a third Southern person had entered off camera just now. Incredible.
Actually, I am a Southern person. I just don't have much of an accent.
Jesse says, that was so awkward when Vanessa was trying to sniff out the rat. I agree completely. On the one hand, I admired it because Vanessa's clearly not avoiding making people uncomfortable, and that is an admirable trait, but also Zach clearly said it in the way he did to not
Well, so Chelsea's like, it ain't me, and Tiffany's like, it ain't me, and Irina's like, well, this one time we had this conversation, and Vanessa's like, oh, I found it, I found the person, and I'm like, did you? Because I'm not even sure what Irina's saying is like the source of this conversation, and so I just think Vanessa is also like not a good detective, on top of her other not great skills. Yeah, that was
rough. Really, really terrible.
All right. So,
Steven says, feels like Zach suddenly wanted to have a reality show moment by calling out Micah live, and it totally didn't gel with his extremely awkward personality. I don't know. I felt like it was a pretty satisfying moment for Zach to call out Micah. I mean, like, let me just put it this way. I would agree it doesn't, like, it's not really who you think of Zach as based on the show, but everything that Zach said was very plausible to me. I don't know if it's true or not. I don't know if Micah really thought she would get married, but it certainly felt plausible that Micah didn't really see herself with Paul. So.
Well, and I'm doing this from memory, but I think it's Micah who says something like, look, you don't see the whole thing in the show. You don't understand from the edit, like, what's said and what's not said. And Zach and maybe Bliss were like, yeah, we know that. We were on the show, and we're saying from that perspective, we still think there's something off here.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see what happens. She feels like a great candidate for Perfect Match.
Mm-hmm.
If they have another season of that. So, just like when people are like getting kicked off of The Bachelor and Bachelorette, you're always like, oh, they're going to go to The Bachelor in Paradise. It really feels like Micah is headed for a perfect match. Okay, so then we have the Marshall. Well, first we have the Jackie and Josh discussion.
Yeah, and whatever. It's, if they're happy together, great. The Vanessa interviewing of them was also terrible. She's like, when are we going to see some babies? And it's like, no one gives a shit, Vanessa. Like, everyone hates these people. Like, read the freaking room. And also, by the way, don't ask people when they're like. This is not just advice for Vanessa Lachey, who I'm sure is watching this, but also for any of you, literally anyone listening right now. Don't ask people when they're having babies.
It's like, because there's so many fertility issues, I just think it's like really offensive. And,
Yeah,
you
don't know what people are going through. Maybe someone had to have their uterus removed for health reasons. Maybe somebody has a low sperm count. It's
miscarriages
like
are
miscarriages.
Common,
It's just like
all my
don't
friends. Yeah, it's
don't
just
ask
awful.
people this question. Like, let alone people on national television. It's freaking inappropriate. You're a bad interviewer, and you should feel bad. Okay.
Also, I don't want to know that. Don't ask that on my behalf. It's
Yeah,
not like I'm secretly
no
like,
one wants to know.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So the thing about Jackie and Josh, so they appear by Zoom from their Seattle place. They have moved in together. They're still together. Jackie is like clinging to Josh's arm for the entire interview. It was actually like a little bit odd, I thought, but she basically has no apology, for sure, because she just feels like she still has the ring. She's very proud that she still has the ring. And I think she basically wanted to set the record straight that she didn't cheat on Marshall. She's already said that, and we've talked about it in this podcast, that she broke up with him and then had this date with Josh in the coffee shop. Okay, fine. Vanessa Lachey asks her, was there a moment you knew? And she says, yes, there was a moment I knew. It's when he called me like a name, and it made me really offended. And, okay, fine. So they get off scot-free. They just kind of, really don't get asked any difficult questions. Josh does say something about he had been cutting weight. You know how like people try to like bulk up muscle and then shed the fat, as a second.
Yeah, and that's why he was more drunk than he should have been that night. Basically.
Because he like drank, and he had already like dropped a bunch of weight recently, and was kind of on an empty stomach. Okay, fine, whatever. It's fine. We've agreed. If we see these people, we're like running, because I know how to read a power dynamic, and I know when I'm going to get bested, and I don't need to tangle with people that can definitely take me. So our paths will never cross.
Let's hope so.
Then we get to the Marshall component of this, and it was just so odd to have Marshall kind of sitting by himself, and then he was asked to react to that, and he's like, well, there's so many things I could say, but I just really, honestly, it's been a year. I want to put it all behind me. And that was like 2 to 3 minutes of video. And and so he like literally couldn't even process everything that was said. So then Vanessa Lachey like goes through it bit by bit. She's saying she didn't cheat on you. He's like, so what? Like, okay, fine. So the next day she's out kissing someone else. That does feel, like it cheapens the relationship. She still has the ring. Why did you want it back? Oh, Jackie said he wanted the ring so that he could propose to somebody else from the show. And we know that's Keisha, who he
apparently went on one date with. Yeah.
He sets the record straight that he actually went on one date with this person. And I think in some ways it was a little bit because he was like wounded because of what had happened with Jackie. And he certainly didn't plan to propose to her. He said he just wanted the ring back because he thought it was a symbol of his love for her, and that she didn't really deserve that love because she wasn't behaving in a way that was really respectful. You can part sometimes on good terms, and it didn't feel like that. And the audience actually clapped at that. Did you notice?
Yeah, I thought Marshall, in my opinion, acquitted himself overall very well. He cops to having made a trying to insult Jackie by commenting on her jawline and saying that she was man-like, basically, right? Which is like pretty bad, like not cool. But he does own up to it and say like it was inappropriate and
he had to be asked a couple times.
Yeah.
I didn't think he was trying to dodge it necessarily, but he didn't want to just go there. But he basically says they had an argument in which she said all the things that she said to her girlfriends in that leaked set of texts, which I'm not going to repeat, which were basically like homophobic. And, he was like, oh, I guess we're joking, and we're kind of like throwing things at each other. And he said he still apologized for it. And he, still.
He's like, it was a text thread that got out of hand. Edna in the chat says, Vanessa was so rude to Marshall and was so soft on Jackie.
Yeah, that was just crazy.
I think we have to be open to the possibility that Vanessa is the worst. Like she's rooting for the wrong people on the show. Like she's rooting for Micah and Jackie, basically. Like those are the.
I was just like, are we not gonna like rake Jackie over the coals for like just basically? Anyway, like all the things she said, I just don't want to repeat. But like I feel so and being basically like not even really on the show. She does say you must have known at some point that you weren't going to show up for that bridesmaid's dress fitting or bridal dress fitting, and like Jackie just gets away without even really having to answer that. And so I do want to say though, in the back and forth, Marshall basically says, I thought we were kind of joking. It turns out she meant everything she said to me because then it was in these leaked texts. Yep.
Stephen Miller says, the only way that Jackie and Josh interview makes sense to me is if Jackie's PR person somehow convinced Netflix to give her final say on whether it aired. Vanessa made it painfully nice. Agreed. Or alternative explanation, Stephen, Vanessa is the worst.
Shortest distance between 2 points.
The one thing I want to call out about what Marshall said that I really appreciate is he said, hey, he's talking to the camera. He's like, hey, stop, people out there in the world, stop making it about me versus Jackie. This is a thing that happened a year ago. Jackie's moved on. She's happy. I'm happy. Everything's fine. And in general, again, putting aside his inappropriate comment, which he's apologized for and I don't endorse, I think Marshall's very mature, and I think what he's saying is very true. There is this desire on the internet to pit people against each other. I see it in my podcasting. Like, you'll see people in the comments like get into a podcast and they'll be like, "Oh, like David is a complete freaking moron," not unlike the other guys that are super smart and like amazing on like literally any of the podcasts I do, or vice versa, right? Like they'll flip it around and whatever. And there's just something about that's innate to many people that wants to like pit people against each other, to take sides, because it's fun, because people enjoy conflict and they enjoy rooting for people. It's like sports basically, and they see podcasting, Love is Blind, whatever, as basically like another form of online sport. And I don't think it's a good thing in general. And I think Marshall was commenting on it. He's like, hey, like, guys, cut this out. It's not benefiting anyone. You're not making anyone's lives better, like by...
Okay, but 90% of that was aimed at Jackie. He was like, this thing where we have like a war with each other is like unhelpful. Like it doesn't help anybody move on. It's irrelevant, and he basically said it has to stop now. And he was actually basically saying it. Yeah, he's saying it to Jackie,
but also to people.
He was, but I don't want to let Jackie off the hook that she has been like running around like just.
Yeah, she promised she would bring the receipts to the reunion.
Turns out she's not even at the reunion, which is fine. And her statement was definitely a little bit more dialed back than she said it would be. But I think that he basically said, hey, like I would like to have a truce. And then he says, I've offered it before. And like they cut away from the conversation at that point. But I think it's pretty clear, like she could also stop feeding the beast, right?
Yeah, totally.
So I think Marshall's probably dating somebody else, Yeah. Godspeed to Marshall.
Jesse in the chat says she's literally drinking tea in the reunion trailer.
They all are though.
But the reunion trailer, I mean, maybe it was shot like many months ago before they knew it was going to happen, but it implies that Jackie's going to be in the show.
Maybe someone's gotten a restraining order somewhere in the meantime. Who knows? Okay.
We didn't talk about Brett and Tiffany at all, but they're very happy. Good for them.
He wore great shoes.
Yeah,
He wore
amazing.
a custom suit. She looks amazing.
Yeah.
And then, I was truly appalled. I think they were trying to like pivot to like a more positive part of the conversation from talking to Marshall. So they're like, and let's segue to a clips package. So we see all the different couples. We see them hanging out. They hung out at Christmas, and it seems like they all went on vacay wearing matching swimsuits. I mean, it's not my taste, but like it's very cute. And then we spend a little time with Brett and Tiffany. We talk yet again about her falling asleep. Let the woman fall asleep. Naps are great. They're good for your health. And in order to like move it forward, Vanessa just keeps harping on who's gonna give us the first Love is Blind baby. And I'm like, no one owes you any babies. 0. I hope there are no babies just for that. Like let people have their own autonomy. Chelsea basically says she had been really raring to go and feeling like she was running out of time, and she has, changed her mind to some extent on that, or come around more to Kwame's way of thinking. And she's just enjoying being with them. Tiffany and Brett similarly, big adjustment for her to move to Portland, which she has done. And I just desperately hate that making a baby, which by the way isn't hard, the person who shows up to introduce this baby question is Bartise, who didn't marry anybody from this show, and I believe has had his child with someone he may not. I don't know if he's dating her. He's not married to her. I don't know, where's this idea that like babies are the best possible outcome.
Love is Blind is very pro-life, I think, is kind of what we've learned. Because Bartise was the one asking that question, and if you recall, there's a huge pro-life debate with Bartise and I think it was Nancy, right?
Yes. God, and how is this show so pro-Bartise? He's like in all of these promotions. I mean, wasn't he a villain? Didn't we decide he was a villain?
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, we've spent, I don't know, 13 hours of our lives watching the show and at least 5 talking about it, I think.
Yeah. I spent at least 1 hour just watching that little circle of death on the reloading page.
Yeah. Have we learned anything? I mean, I do think it's nice that some 3 couples got together and they seem happy, and who knows if they'll last, but
okay, granted that I did not see season 1. I know a little bit about it. I think that this
HB says the world doesn't need Love is Blind babies. I would agree.
Do you think this was the most wholesome season overall? It had the meanest people in it as characters in how they're depicted.
Yes. This is a shockingly not horrible season of Love is Blind.
Yeah.
There are some terrible things that happened. Vanessa Lachey's hosting for the reunion being up there, and also the reunion technical problems themselves being up there. But overall, this is like, hey, this is a very respectable season of reality television. Where like, yes, there's some travesties, but like, there's some nice things that come out of it too. And
yeah, I think season 2.
And you learn about like how people interact and date today. Yeah, so it's like, it's a very reasonable season of television.
2, the Chicago season, strikes me as a totally failed season. Like I have no positive associations when I think back on that, and I feel really sad for some of the people who got their hearts broken. Well, we'll see. I believe they have already filmed in Tampa Bay, St. Petersburg area. So I think they're casting for DC and maybe like another location. I think there's a UK season coming. There's already been Japan and Brazil. So we're going to see more gold goblets and low production values in different locations around the world.
A few final comments as we wrap up today. I want to give a big shout out to all the people at decodingtv.com.
Thank you.
Paid subscribers who are making podcasts like this one possible. Be sure to go to podcast.decodingtv.com to check out the rest of the shows that Decoding TV is covering. Right now we're covering Succession and also Beef and Barry and Dead Ringers and a bunch of other stuff. So podcast.decodingtv.com, and you can support this podcast at decodingtv.com. There might be some questions about... someone's asking, will your live stay public in case we joined late? LOL. Yes. You can watch this entire conversation on YouTube at youtube.com/decodingtv. Thanks to everyone who's joining us.
And people can also get it on their podcast feed.
Yes, at decodingreality.tv. people might be asking, is Dave's mic is peaking a little bit. Might need a leveling out later. Oh, yes, we'll work on that. Anyway, people are asking, or people might be curious, like, is there going to be more Decoding Reality after this? And the answer is, I don't know. We will see. I think this was a clear case where, like, literally some of these people literally live within 3 miles of where we're sitting right now. So it's like we kind of want to know who these people are. Will we cover another season of Love is Blind? I don't know. Let us know at decodingtv@gmail.com if that's something you're interested in. I've had a great time chatting with Joy about it, and I think a lot of people have enjoyed listening to us talk about it. So, yes, as Carol says, there are dozens of you. Really appreciate that. So, thanks so much to everyone who's listened. Thanks so much to everyone who's written in and supported us. We really appreciate it, and a big thanks to Joy for chatting with me about it.
It has been my pleasure.
All right, folks. See you at decodingtv.com.
May your downloads of Netflix eventually work.
Goodbye.